Good morning and welcome to Rising. Thanks so much for tuning in. We've got a lot of great news to get to today, lots of exciting things to talk about. I'm joined again by Nayyera. Thank you for being in studio with us.
Good to be back with you, Robby. What a day.
Yes, let's get right to it. So for the first time, a Democratic leader has alluded to Joe Biden not necessarily being the party's nominee after all. Now, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Jamie Raskin, told MSNBC's Velshi on Sunday there are serious conversations happening right now within the party behind the scenes. How to move forward after Biden's completely botched debate performance last week. Well, let's watch.
Regardless of what President Biden decides, our party is going to be unified, and our party also needs him at the very center of our deliberations and our campaign. And so whether he's the candidate or someone else is the candidate, he is going to be the keynote speaker at our convention.
Now, whether intended or not, Velshi brushed off Raskin's comments. Maybe the comment that stung most of all from the White House was from MSNBC's Morning Joe. Now, it's widely reported that President Biden often confides in host Joe Scarborough, a former GOP congressman. Let's listen to what Morning Joe had to say.
I love Joe Biden and Jill, and I will gladly debate anybody, anytime, any place, anywhere over the issue of whether Joe Biden has been the most effective president. Donald Trump lied over and over and over and over again. And Joe Biden couldn't respond to any of those lies. In fact, as the New York Times said, he spent much of the night with his mouth agape and his eyes darting back and forth. He couldn't fact check anything Donald Trump said. And not only that, he missed one layup after another after another. He couldn't respond effectively to Donald Trump trying to overthrow American democracy on January 6th. He couldn't respond effectively to Donald Trump's continued stream of lies about his own record. And he couldn't even respond effectively on the issue of abortion, where for some reason he darted wildly to the issue of immigration.
David Axelrod posted, quote, reality check, Biden is the nominee of the Democratic Party, nominated by voters in primaries across the country. Is that a fact check? Unless the POTUS himself decides to quit, which he won't, that issue's settled. The discussion that is going on now was timely a year ago when few wanted to have it. It's largely irrelevant today. Now, NBC News politics managing editor said, quote, new Biden's campaign manager held a tense call with top donors today outlining what would happen to the campaign infrastructure should Biden step aside. In short, the war chest goes to Kamala Harris. Now, one participant said some donors even asked for refunds for their contributions. And host of Pod Save America says, quote, Pod is up. Take a listen for our full thoughts. But obviously, that debate was an effing disaster. We have to beat Donald Trump. We have to have a nominee who can do that. And since we haven't had the convention yet, it would be absurd if Democrats didn't at least have a serious discussion about whether Joe Biden, who's a wonderful human being and has been a great president, is up for the job. Jon Favreau then backpedaled, saying, quote, it seems like Biden and his team think that despite what we all saw on Thursday night, the president is still the best candidate to do that. Like we've said on the pod, that's their call, and if they stick with it, we'll certainly keep doing everything humanly possible to help reelect the president, including encouraging the hundreds of thousands of voters, volunteers who helped elect Biden in 2020 to again donate their time and money to winning in November. Stakes are too high to do anything else.
Now, the New York Times editorial board came out the next day saying Biden shouldn't run either. In a piece titled, To Serve His Country, President Biden should leave the race. The paper wrote, quote, as it stands, the president is engaged in a reckless gamble. There are Democratic leaders better equipped to present clear, compelling, and energetic alternatives to a second Trump presidency. There is no reason for the party to risk the stability and security of the country by forcing voters to choose between Mr. Trump's deficiencies and those of Mr. Biden. New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman wrote that while Biden's a good man and a fine president, It's time that they move aside, adding, quote, to give America the greatest shot possible of deterring the Trump threat in November, the president has to come forward and declare that he will not be running for re-election and is releasing all of his delegates for the Democratic National Convention. Now, despite the calls for him to bow out, they're intensifying. There is no sign that President Biden plans to do so, at least as of right now. A new CBS post-debate poll reveals voters do not want Biden to run. 72% of respondents said he should not run, while 28% still say he should. The poll also shows that nearly half of Democratic voters now think Biden should not run for re-election. Polling is always going to be up and down, but the reality of Biden's age has not changed since he first ran. If anything, he's gotten older. That debate was painful for anybody even who cared about him personally or cares about elders and how they appear in public. The fact that you had a younger generation of Democrats, the folks who came in and were inspired by Obama, let's not forget, Obama was the insurgency against the establishment, which was the Hillary team. The fact that they came out publicly and said of their former vice president that this is a serious conversation to have, and then Obama's campaign manager says, well, nobody wanted to have this conversation a year ago. That's when you should have had it. I'm like, there was a lot of people who wanted to have that conversation a year ago. A lot of people within the Democratic Party, within the left. This is not even necessarily a third party question. It's a how do you manage to be the party of diversity, of multi-generational coalitions, of the working class, and completely ignore in your party process the thoughts, the voices, the choices of the rising electorate that is under the age of 65. I mean, that is not just a nobody wanted to have this conversation. That is putting a blanket over something everybody within the party has known has been a problem for many years.
It's with the whole they should have had this conversation before thing. It's kind of like that meme that's like the best time to delete this was 5 minutes ago. The second best time is now. The best time to have the conversation about Joe Biden being too old to run was in fact a year ago, but the second best time is now. Like it can still get worse. And after that debate performance, no one has any confidence, least of all the electorate, that Joe Biden could be president for another 4 years. The performance was abysmal. It's not possible to put successful spin on it, but the things they've come up to defend it are just totally unacceptable. The debate didn't happen between, did you hear this, between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., which are the times at which he is high functioning. I think the job of being president occasionally occurs outside of the 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Do you remember the 3 a.m. phone call thing? Who do you want to pick up the phone at 3 a.m. and take that call when it comes to...
Joe Biden's going to say something about beating the hell out of Medicare at that time of night. Yeah, these conversations should have been had a long time ago. And again, they didn't have a real, for the people saying, well, he won the primaries, the voters decided on him. I mean, not really, not this time around. Yes, he absolutely won in 2020 through the primary, through a robust process. He actually did not automatically get the establishment support until there was a lot of movement in the direction of Bernie Sanders and everyone else had cleared the field, and then the establishment came home to Joe Biden. But he fought for it and he won it. This time it was a coronation. It was the attitude, well, he's the incumbent president. He gets to run for re-election. They didn't really hold a competitive primary. They did not have debates. What if he had debated Dean Phillips or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a year ago when they were both running in the Democratic, ostensibly as Democrats, against him? There was no actual process, a debate. You could have seen if he'd had a debate performance like this back then, there would have been time to do something to fix this ticket. Maybe there isn't now, but he is on pace to lose unless something dramatic happens.
So interestingly enough, if you take a generic poll of different folks who've been mentioned, whether it be Kamala Harris or Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom on the Democratic side as alternates to Biden, and put them up against Trump, you pretty much still have a 1 or 2 point difference. So the way that it is working right now for active voters, or at least people who are answering polls these days, is it is a party thing, right? So they will take any party person and believe the same thing about a person on that ticket from as a presidential candidate as they will about Trump. So many, many people could, in theory, including Joe Biden, just have a D next to their name and beat Trump. I think part of what people are challenged by right now is that whole message of, the heartbeat away from the presidency, even though that was used against John McCain, and that idea of, oh, really, you want Sarah Palin as president next? This seems so much more real with a Biden in day-to-day terms, that heartbeat away from the presidency. And for better or for worse, Kamala Harris does not have that gravitas, the appeal, whatever you want to call it.
The whole thing gets a disaster.
The Democratic Party. Now, well, I think she has a very important skill set. I think she's a very smart person. I think that she does have people who love her, like she's got the K-hive. But there is no, it is not an automatic, if something happens to Joe Biden, everybody would immediately be okay within the party. I'm not even talking the broader electorate, within the party with Kamala Harris. That's the problem with these party structures and how things happen. And it's like, oh my God, 2 years before we even know what's happening in the country, we know who's going to be who the party nominee is going to be. I mean, I get it. Incumbents, they worked for it. They did a good job. I get all of how party structures work, but this is the problem of how party structures work, right? Like, this is a very different moment right now than what we were facing as a country 2 years ago. And to not have an opportunity to chime in or to have even, let's call them shorter election cycles, right? Where in real time, you can actually pick and understand who you're voting for and who you put forward. Last thing I will say on that, it's not like the Trump has been anointed by the GOP for some time. So this is very much a complaint about party structures, period. And my resignation that this might not be changeable before November.
Yeah, I mean, on the Trump side, I mean, they did have a competitive primary process. There, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie and Mike Pence and a bunch of other people ran against Trump. They did a bunch of debates. They asked voters, Republican primary voters in the states, and they, not all of them, but a solid majority wanted to stick by Trump, and so Trump is the nominee again. Nothing like that took place on the Democratic side.
Well, none of the people that are being mentioned right now, by the way, actually stood up and say, hey, we would run against Joe Biden. Everybody that's being discussed right now, whether they're Democratic governors or elsewhere, are people who themselves said, no, thank you, I'm not going to run against Joe Biden. So that's another layer of this, is the party itself.
It's a mess.
The way the party structured this is the problem.
It's a mess. All right, we will continue to discuss this, and we have much more coming up on Rising. Stay tuned.
Trump using the word Palestinian as a slur. Take a listen to the first time he used it as an attack during the presidential debate.
As far as Israel and Hamas, Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one that wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
I've never heard so much foolishness.
And here he is at a Friday rally. Let's watch.
Take a look at that. Look at a guy like Senator Schumer. I've always known him. I've known him a long time. I come from New York. I knew Schumer. He's become a Palestinian. He's a Palestinian now. Congratulations. He was very loyal to Israel and to Jewish people. He's Jewish, but he's become a Palestinian because they have a couple of more votes or something. Nobody's quite figured it out.
Marks a sharp contrast from the way John McCain treated his presidential debate opponent back in 2008. Listen to McCain respond to this town hall attendee who says she can't trust Obama because he's, quote, an Arab.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues.
Joining us now to discuss is SiriusXM host Dean Obeidallah. Dean, are you a decent Arab?
I think it can be both. And what John McCain there was, at the time, applauded. It was the right thing to do. What Donald Trump did by calling Joe Biden a Palestinian, then Chuck Schumer a Palestinian, is reducing ethnicity, which he despises already, Palestinians, to a slur. And I make the case to my fellow Palestinian Americans, Joe Biden has not been good when it comes to Gaza and the Palestinians. His rhetoric changed over time. He tried to ultimately broker a ceasefire after getting pressure. For Donald Trump, as president, he did everything he could to dehumanize us, to delegitimize claims. And if Netanyahu was there and wanted to do ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in the West Bank, then Trump would say fine to it if he were back in the White House. So, him making Palestinian a slur now, it's new. We haven't heard this before. It's kind of remarkable. And I hope it wakes up people in my community to just the existential threat that Donald Trump is to our people and to our families who live in the West Bank and Gaza, East Jerusalem, and elsewhere.
Is he really making it a slur? It sounds to me like Trump was accusing Biden of being on the side of the Palestinians in the conflict with Israel, using shorthand, saying he's turned against Israel. He's too deferential to the Palestinian side of things. Now, you can obviously disagree with that analysis. I know many people on the left think Joe Biden is so pro-Israel it's bordering on genocidal, but I think that's what Trump was saying. I don't know that I would say it was a slur.
Well, maybe you speak Trump better than me, but what I heard was a man using the term of my ethnicity and my late father's ethnicity as a slur. And that was the point of it. He didn't say he's now supporting the Palestinians or he's supporting the Palestinians more than Israel and Netanyahu. He said he's become a Palestinian. He said the same thing about Chuck Schumer. It's interesting, at the rally, the Trump crowd didn't cheer or boo when he said he's becoming a Palestinian. I think they were baffled by, well, what does that even mean? I think in time when Trump will do his best to define that. So at future rallies, when he says Palestinian, they will boo because they're the boogeyman. The same way Donald Trump demonized Barack Obama, it's not being from this country, then wanted to ban all Muslims from this country when he was running in 2016. It's a continuation. It's a holy war against people who are not white.
Dean, when you say it's a continuation of what's already existed, the reality is American foreign policy has always been preferential to Israel. So how is Trump a departure from anything that the Biden administration, the Trump administration, the Obama administration had done before?
Well, there's a difference between policy and rhetoric, right? So in the case of policy, yes. For decades, the U.S. policy towards Israel has been siding with Israel generally over the Palestinians to the point of detrimental, where you're not fostering a two-state solution or any kind of peaceful solution going forward. I think things have changed with the Democratic base. We see that in polling. And I think that what Trump has done, though, it's not about policy. Policy, he was horrible. As president, he ended funding for the UN Relief Works Agency. He ended millions of dollars of funding to a Methodist hospital in East Jerusalem that provided complex medical care for Palestinians that they couldn't get in the West Bank. So he was literally killing Palestinians. He didn't care. In terms of policy, Trump was horrible. Gave Golan Heights. Israel moved the embassy, which is a minor thing to me in the big picture, but it was sort of symbolic of Donald Trump's commitment to anything that Netanyahu wanted to do. This is a different level. This is saying this ethnicity. What if Donald Trump had said he's acting like a black? He's becoming a Jew. There'd be rightfully a backlash. There'd be screaming voices in the media saying, what did you mean by that? That's racist. It's bigoted. But when it says he's becoming a Palestinian, that's what he said. He's becoming a Palestinian. Then almost nothing. And so, I'm thankful that you're covering it right now. It should get more coverage. The dehumanization and devaluation of Palestinian lives has been long in our media. And there's just a vote earlier last week, Nayyera, in the House to ban the State Department from even using the Gaza Health Ministry. Their statistics on death toll and injuries in Gaza. The problem is they're the primary source. It's not like there's another source you can go to. So what they're doing is trying to, again, dehumanize Palestinian losses and say they don't even exist. And it's a remarkable time to see this happening.
The Palestinians, according to polls that I can see, overwhelmingly support Hamas, support violent resistance and reprisals against Israel. So if it's a dirty word, does that reflect that the overwhelming majority of the underlying population supports the kind of terrorist actions that have put them in this precarious situation?
You mean like the 6-year-old Hind who was killed in her car when she was driving with her family? Like that, was she polled? Do you mean the Christians who were sheltering in a Gaza church who are relatives to Justin Amash, the former congressman? Were those Christians in that church polled before they were slaughtered by the Israeli military? So I'd love to see the polling. Are they going 10 to 10? They ask, hey, I know you guys can't eat right now and you're starving to death because of the blockade, but who do you like in this conflict? That kind of stuff. The idea of saying your political views are justify slaughtering women and children is a level of callousness that we should never entertain in a civilized society. And unfortunately, you've seen some voices who are very pro-Netanyahu who've said that. And I think it's unfortunate. Let's talk about a two-state solution going forward. And if you want to talk about radicals in the Israeli cabinet right now, there's Ben-Gvir. He was adjudicated by an Israeli court in 2007 of terrorism against Arab Christians and Arab Muslims. Why are we doing anything with an administration that Netanyahu invited a literal terrorist into the administration? And where is the denunciation of a man who's actually a terrorist in there? And again, it's against Christians and Arabs. So people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, this is a holy war against Christians and Muslims. And that's their view. We are all inferior to them. That's not the mainstream Israeli view. That's not the mainstream Jewish view by any stretch. But that's the type of people that Netanyahu's invited into his administration.
What do you need to hear, Dean, from the Biden administration now that Trump has, in 2 successive days, used Palestinian as a derogatory label?
Well, it'd be nice if President Biden, in time, would have pushed back on it. Obviously, right now, there's a huge fire going on since the debate about his performance. But in time, and when there's opportunities, himself and other Democrats, we'd like to see other Democratic leaders push back on that. The idea that there's something inherently evil or bad about being Palestinian. It's the same mindset as like Hamas will demonize all Israelis and say, well, any of them, you can kill any of them, it doesn't matter. That's vile and despicable. So we can't have that. And I hope going forward that the voices, and even a handful of Republicans perhaps would be nice, talk about the humanity of Palestinians who are both Christian and Muslim, living under occupation and oppression right now simply because of their faith, that I'd like to hear some. It should be bipartisan, to be blunt. I know I'm being naive, but it should be bipartisan.
You know, I thought it was interesting in the debate that neither Trump nor Biden seemed to want to say very much about what's going on in Gaza. It was one time where the moderators had to press Trump to actually answer a question specifically about Israel. When they'd asked about it, he pivoted to Ukraine, and they said, but what about Israel? He didn't really say very much specifically on it, even though it's a weak issue for Biden, because some of the base, some progressives, some Arab Americans are very upset about the administration's current policy. There's a lot of frustration. Trump has not signaled if he would do something differently, exactly in which direction it would be different. It kind of just rhetorically, I think, wanting to say, yeah, Biden's screwing this up, because he knows people are mad at Biden about it, but he's not going to commit to doing anything differently. So neither really wanted to talk about it and were pressed to do so.
I agree with you 100%. I think neither one wants to engage on it. Donald Trump is sending out ambiguous signals. He's actually sending surrogates like his father-in-law, who's Arab American, to Michigan to meet with the Arab American community there and Muslim Americans there, trying to entice them. So Trump is being intentionally ambiguous about it. He's saying, like, his track record was blindly pro-Israel and pro-Netanyahu in the first term. I think he's going to ride on that and knows enough not to step into this, not to articulate some specific issue where you might lose some people who are thinking of supporting him. I will tell you, overwhelmingly, the Arab and Muslim community, based on polling, is not going to support Trump. The question is, do they come off their couch and vote for Biden or not? But again, in 2020, 30% of Muslim Americans did vote for Trump. So there is a subset of the Muslim American community that will support Donald Trump for various reasons, probably not with foreign policy, but with tax cuts for the wealthy, things along those lines. And I think Biden didn't want to engage in it because, yes, he's stepping on minefields. He's trying to navigate a situation where he's trying to win back supporters while navigating a situation where they're a part of the Democratic base that is very pro-Netanyahu and part that is more about being either pro-Palestinian or just in the middle. And I think the largest swath is just pro-humanity, that want to see both Israelis and Palestinians live in peace, and that mothers of Palestinians and Israelis don't have to fear for their children when they go outside, will they be killed by a militant or a missile. I think that's where most people come down. And I think the politicization of this conflict has made it much more difficult to get to that point.
Well, to your point, Dean, more than just Muslim Americans and more than just Palestinians care about what's going on in Gaza. There is a broader humanitarian crisis that has brought forward a different electorate than what Biden or Trump are used to working with. Dean OBEIDALLAH, host of Sirius XM Progress, thank you for joining us today. We'll have more Rising coming up.
Breaking news, former President Donald Trump scored a massive legal win today in his election interference case. The Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for all official acts that he took while in office. It was a 6-3 ruling, with the 3 liberal justices filing a dissent. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, sent the case back to the district court to decide now whether Trump's alleged conduct qualifies as official or unofficial acts. The decision could further delay the start of his D.C. criminal trial over charges that he attempted to overturn the 2020 election results. Roberts writes, quote, "We conclude that under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power requires that a former president have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office. At least with respect to the president's exercise of his core constitutional powers, this immunity must be absolute." Roberts added, quote, "The president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law, but Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution." In her dissent, Justice Sotomayor fires back, writing, quote, "Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office for personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends, because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be." That is the majority's message today. Even if these nightmare scenarios never play out, and I pray they never do, the damage has been done. The relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of official powers, the president is now a king above the law. Special counsel Jack Smith had charged Trump with 4 felonies relating to his efforts to overturn the election, and Trump's team had argued in response that his actions were all part of his official duties as president, and thus he could not be prosecuted for those acts. Reacting to the ruling, Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American." Your thoughts, Nayyera?
Well, the case of federal election interference, just from a factual perspective of what we're seeing this morning from this ruling, is that we don't know if Trump, calling Pence and arguing with him about what to do about the votes, or even if Trump calling the Georgia Secretary of State about the votes, if that counts as official, because he did it from the White House, and everything the president does from the White House could now be considered to be official, or if that was campaign election interference, right? 2 very big things. That election interference case, though, is already going to last well beyond this election. And so this legal theory emboldens Trump in this moment, who even before the ruling came out was on radio saying, this will have a bigger impact on Joe Biden than myself. And Trump has talked about going after his political enemies. That's what he intends to do. So he's signaling that he now has a Supreme Court that will allow him to prosecute political opponents if he gets elected for another 4 years. So, of course, Trump's going to be happy about this. I mean, this is, in general, based on the last couple of days of decision, a court that is grabbing power for itself, not necessarily giving as much to Congress or to the constitutional idea of the executive branch that is supposed to execute Congress's policies.
I agree with that. I mean, in one of the decisions last week, they explicitly gave power back to Congress in terms of the repeal of the Chevron decision. That was them saying, no, Congress is the one that makes laws, not random employees of the federal executive administrative state. They explicitly called on Congress to be an equal branch and actually legislate and actually govern. And there have been cases in recent days, these decisions where the ideological mix of the court was completely scrambled. There was a case where Ketanji Brown Jackson joined the conservatives and Amy Coney Barrett was with the liberals. There was one where the liberals were completely split. So this isn't ideologically. It's not down the line every single time, but this is a down the line one, saying that the president should be immune for prosecution relating to official acts. Now, they don't define what are the official acts and what are the unofficial acts. So your question about whether the call counts as official because it was in the White House is explicitly not resolved by this decision. They call on the lower courts to make an opinion about that, and then it'll go back to the Supreme Court, and then we'll finally get them to say what's an official act and what's an unofficial act, maybe. So the functional aspect of this is that the case is going to go on forever. It will not be wrapped up. It won't even get started before the election.
We are going to be relitigating that election for years and years to come, potentially into multiple presidencies at this point.
Well, we're not going to be relitigating the election. We're going to be litigating whether the things Trump said and did after the election he is criminally liable for.
Well,
I always had a lot of discomfort with the Jack Smith case because it rests on a lot of things that Trump said that I think were totally inappropriate. And to me, the remedy for the conduct that Trump committed, that what occurred on January 6th, what he was doing was impeachment. He was impeached, and then they voted not to remove him from office. And tough luck. That's how it goes sometimes. Now they've been trying to put him in prison for the things he said about the election, which to me is a speech issue, and I've been always
there is that whole challenge of actually using the White House phone and your time to tell somebody to find votes, and the idea of using your own campaign dollars to run an entirely different slate of electors for the Electoral College. And I mean, there was a concerted novel legal theory, an effort for Trump to never acknowledge, and even at the debate, did not acknowledge that he would consider an objective election as legitimate. If he thought it was legitimate, that was his debate answer. Even this next one, he's like, well, if I think it's fair, I will accept it. So all of this is the case, the details of the case aside, this is a candidate and a former president who wants to use the law to get himself in power and do what he wants to do.
Hillary Clinton didn't think her loss was legitimate, and nobody tried to put her in jail. So.
Well, again, the idea, there is a difference. There is a big difference between saying something, and the law is clear.
That's what Trump did. He said it.
And then doing and funding the actions. That's a big part of what the Jack Smith case is that the federal election interference and all of these other people who have taken guilty pleas because they violated the law.
That's in the Georgia case. I agree that the Georgia case is stronger against Trump.
That's part of what Trump,
case is not.
This is all part of that same stew that makes Trump feel empowered to not only run for president again, but also to consider having more power. I want to get back to what you said about the cases in the last couple of days, because it is about Chevron and Loper. Loper hasn't gotten as much attention as others. The combination of the two is interesting right now, I think, because the Constitution makes it very clear who's supposed to interpret laws. Laws that are passed are interpreted by the executive branch. That is what that is, right? That is the purpose of that. The executive branch, they are not random people. Let's not dismiss all of the civil servants who have kept everything functioning about making sure, we get our Social Security and, tax rebates, all of this stuff on time. The experts who sit at the FDA to make sure that our food is safe, right? Like we get these salmonella poisoning alerts, don't buy spinach over here. All of that is the actual day-to-day quality of life functioning of the federal government. The combination of these two cases from Friday, and I know the breaking news is immunity, but my day-to-day life will be far more impacted if those experts no longer get to weigh in on how things happen in this country. Every 2 years, congressional leaders who are elected from increasingly gerrymandered districts, who have their own views about everything and opinions, and who are not actually experts who have served in the field.
We're not. This is a democracy, not an oligarchy ruled by experts.
And
not a
that
democracy.
is why
the experts don't get to make new policy. The elected legislative representatives.
Bingo. And
we have rule by Fauci's and Birx's of the world that are totally unaccountable to the American people until this decision, which says no. In fact, the people who are not who were last put in office decades ago do not get to make policy out of whole cloth. The legislative does. That is what our Constitution set up. The agencies are not supposed to be interpreting laws. They're supposed to be carrying out the laws prescribed by Congress. And they've had massive leeway to do whatever the hell they want for decades until now.
Wow.
Now it is over.
And Robby, I hear you on the overregulation. I do. But look at the writing and the legal interpretation. This is not actually turning it back just to the states. What this results in, right? We just talked about.
Not to the states, to Congress.
What we said it gets back to the actual impact of this will be litigation and litigation and litigation. And who decides all of this litigation? When the quote is ambiguous laws passed by Congress, the court ends up interpreting. Do you and I get to vote for federal court judges all the time? Did we vote for anybody in the Supreme Court?
The court determining is what the Constitution prescribes. That is it's the
only person
constitutional law.
The people we get to vote for, members of Congress.
Members of the court are appointed by the executive.
I get to vote for members of Congress, and I get to vote for the president.
Right.
I don't get to vote for the Supreme Court.
Right.
I'm deeply uncomfortable when the Supreme Court decides to pass
take it out with Thomas Jefferson.
that take power into their own hands. That take more and more power going beyond.
They're not taking more power into their own hands.
Delegate.
They're taking power from the executive branch and giving it back to Congress. They're rebalancing the three. That's what I'd say.
In effect, in their own favor.
They're taking power. No, the court is taking power away from the executive.
Federal judges
in
will
the
be
Chevron
the ones.
decision, not in this decision. It goes both ways.
Loper is the one. The combination of Chevron and Loper, and so clearly we're getting into some legal theory here now. And yes, I did actually go to law school, which is why I get nerdy about this.
Right, but
it is that broader idea of, as you get to, right, the broader idea of who should be deciding how day-to-day life works. I don't want to be ruled by anybody. I don't like rulings, right? The idea of being, regulations and rules, I don't love them, but I do strongly, strongly want a federal system, not local community by local community, making sure that things like the national supply chain of food, that is safe. Right? Those are the types of things that I sit there and look at. That's something good that we actually get from the federal government. So let's not mess with that. Let's fix this insane tax code that we have, which is not something that people seem to be worried about litigating.
In that decision, the group that brought the action before the Supreme Court, it was small businesses that were being forced to pay $700 to the National Marine Fisheries Services to be regulated. The National Marine Fisheries Services said that we're extorting you for this amount of money. The small businesses in the fishing category sued, saying, but there's actually nothing in the regulation that says we need to pay this amount of money. And the National Marine Fisheries Services said, right, we are interpreting the statute to say that you have to pay us $700. And they said, but it literally doesn't say that. And it was sued on that basis. So now we are saying that no, if you want to charge the businesses for the cost of being regulated, Congress can write a statute that says precisely that. But the government that is taking in the revenue can't just force them to do it, the executive agency, without it saying that in the law from Congress. I want to go back to that.
So we can agree on that. We can
Congress
absolutely agree on that.
That's the case.
But the Supreme Court.
That's exactly what the Supreme Court said.
That is not. The Supreme Court went beyond that.
They said every other business being built by the government has that same right to have an exactly written.
They went beyond. There is a narrowly tailored interpretation and way to write a decision, and that's not what the majority did here. The majority used this one situation, and rather than answering for that one, decided to take a case and then answer for a much broader.
I would have them go even farther. They said this is not retroactive and we're not going back in time to all the other ones. It's just moving forward. I wish they'd done that. I wish they'd gone back.
Which, again, this is the debate about how much regulation should or should not be done. The function.
No, who should be doing it?
The function.
Who should be doing it?
The Supreme Court did not limit this to the case in front of them, right? The Supreme Court decided who should be regulating how much, and in fact, not only said that they set it up so that they would be the ones the decision would come back to over and over and over again. And my point is, set up the system so that people who are elected and directly responsible to us are the ones who get to help put that framework together.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's what the Supreme Court said. That's the way it was intended to be, and that's the way we're going back to.
That's inaccurate, Robbie.
No,
that is not what the Supreme Court said.
Exactly
and
what
the irony is, we actually agree on so much of this, but this is where the majority and how they write these opinions. Let's bring it back to immunity, because that was technically the news of today. The immunity one, they could have answered very clearly. If in this specific case, what counts as official and what did not. They're like, no, but you know what? We're not. We're not actually going to solve the official problem in front of us. We're not going to sit here and answer this question for all of you of whether or not Trump can be prosecuted by Jack Smith. We're going to, shove this back to a lower court.
He can be prosecuted if they were official acts.
Right, but they don't give it.
Unofficial
Do you
acts.
see? So this is what this court is doing. They are actually being deeply political and dancing around issues that matter to us that we want answered in real time. They're like, oh, right now, I'm going to take this really long view, tinker a little bit over here, tinker over there, and instead, it's going to create chaos in systems that people have real questions about. What are they supposed to be doing next?
All right, there you have it. More Rising right after this. President Biden's disastrous debate performance was a gift to the GOP, and Republicans certainly know it. Now, when asked if Biden should be removed from the White House through the 25th Amendment, a constitutional provision that allows for the president's removal in cases of incapacitation, this is what GOP Speaker of the House Mike Johnson had to say.
We have North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis, and he's reportedly calling on Biden's cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment, which would possibly remove him from office. Do you think this is going too far?
I've been asked a lot about this over the last 2 days. My background's in constitutional law. This is not something that's been invoked before, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I was asked by Hill Press yesterday, if you were in the cabinet, would you be considering that? I said I would, in good conscience.
So this is, on some level, it's not just about whether Biden can be or should be running for re-election to serve 4 more years, but whether, given what we saw last week, he is even capable of doing the job of the presidency right now. So there is a provision, obviously, the 25th Amendment, which allows, it needs to be initiated under different circumstances by different people, but essentially a majority of his cabinet would have to vote that he is not able to discharge his duties, that he's unable to do that, and then the vice president would take on the duties of the presidency. That's how that would work.
Yeah, the last time this question came up, it was actually Congressman Jamie Raskin raising this against President Trump.
How about that?
How about that, right? Like once you start talking about impeaching presidents and using 25th Amendment for insanity, though, truly, if I were to go give a cognitive test to both presidents at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would like to see how they both track. We're not talking about 2 young men of the age of Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, or President Obama, or any future woman who may run for office who probably would need to not be 80 years old at this point to do that. This is pure politics of what is good for the goose is good for the gander, but it does blur the GOP's argument based on one debate, does blur the lines between what Trump has done in office, how Trump behaves on a day-to-day basis, and the debate of being old, which here's where this might backfire for them. We look at the average age of the Senate. It is 61 or 67. Congress also, this is the oldest Congress we have had.
Yeah, remove them all. They're all
this is the oldest Congress we have ever had.
Okay, but hold on.
So suddenly the Biden debate, and then clearly he had energized because he probably slept the next day at the rally, that is the thing that suddenly brings 25th Amendment out for the GOP.
The thing. No, the mainstream media went crazy for the 25th Amendment when Trump was in power. There was constant writing in mainstream outlets, progressive outlets on progressive and mainstream cable news about, is the 25th Amendment the solution? This is the solution because of policy disagreements with Trump, not because he's too old to be president, which is actually what the 25th Amendment is about, but because they don't like the way he behaves and the things he says and the policies he has. They were all about using the 25th Amendment to deal with that situation. Now, we have an actual situation that bears on the 25th Amendment, actually has to do with what it's intended for, a president who is very, very old and is showing it and is unable to effectively communicate. And there are very real questions about his cognitive ability. That is what the 25th Amendment is about. And now it's just now it's coming from the right, obviously. They're using, as you said, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Turnabout is fair play. But the mainstream media, which loved this as a potential Trump solution, is now radio silence. I think that's very funny, amusing. I'm laughing.
Yeah, because I think they're putting a debate in context. That's the thing, right? It is a debate at 9 p.m. at night. To be fair, I didn't really want to be up watching it. having had to watch it for work, was painful on multiple levels. And it was shocking, really, the next day. People, I mean, most of my friends and family were like, where was this guy? Where was this Biden at the rally in North Carolina? Like, where was this guy yesterday at the debate? So that is absolutely a discussion that we know is happening within the Democratic Party. People are pushing for more of that discussion. But the New York Times suddenly calling for Biden to step aside for the good of the country never quite managed to do that headline for Trump.
What do you mean? That is nonsense. They've called on Trump. They want Trump to...
No, they never wrote an entire editorial board opinion saying Trump should step down. That is never, the New York Times has not done that on Trump. However,
pretty sure they have.
The funniest part of this, to me, is that the New York Times, who Biden won't sit down with, Biden is the first person to denigrate or dismiss. Editorial board opinion, Google that, not individual columnists. You and I both know how media works. The Biden piece is fascinating to me, that they thought that Biden would care that they said that. Like, Biden has made it clear he doesn't care for the New York Times. He's not going to sit down with the New York Times. He is definitely focused on a state-by-state strategy. And the editorial board thought, oh, hey, we're going to do this headline, and that's going to suddenly influence the president? That, to me, most of that seems to me to be
they're not
inside.
They're not calling him to drop out because they're pro-Trump. They're calling him to drop out because they think he's going to lose to Trump.
They're
saying not pro-Trump.
They are. The New York Times
crazy.
Headline was because it's good for the country. I'm like, oh, at some point, you know who did do that, actually, which I thought was side by side. Love the Philadelphia Inquirer. They're also a nonprofit newsroom, but the Philadelphia Inquirer did the for the good of the country. Trump should step out of the race, right? Like, okay, got it.
Nobody wants that. It's a rematch of two very disliked people, and they should. I hope Biden drops out. I hope Trump drops out. I hope we have totally different and better candidates.
But Robby, that's like, right? Like, we're all sitting here like, okay, do any of us really think that dynamic is going to change? Could there be an open convention for Democrats? What they're challenged with right now is the war chest, the legalities of the war chest. You pick a new Democrat, how does that money even go to that new person? How does the infrastructure go?
Biden is not capable of being president for another 4 months, let alone 4 years.
I
think my concern, based on what I watched.
And I am concerned
in the same way that
Trump,
our very elderly grandparents or great grandparents should not be trusted with the most at this time in their life. Should the most
I don't think Trump should have been trusted the last 4 years either, let alone these next 4 years, right? So if we're talking about trust, then there is a measure of talking about the humanity of the two choices we have right now and the two people we have right now. And while I don't like this, with my soul do not like that this is the choice that we have, and this is the best we could do as a younger country, frankly, that one is a good man, one is not. Like, right? That is to me on a human level. There's an aspect of Joe Biden that I like as a human. There's an aspect of Trump I do not. There are many policies I do not like about Biden. Far more threats that I feel from Trump to our democracy, to how we operate as a system, and how we work together as a public. I do not see those threats similarly from Biden. Again, very general. You can put me in the double hater category of people. What do double haters do? Double haters are the folks who really don't like either candidate. But that's
I'm a double hater.
That's 20% of the electorate. Double haters need to decide after we get through the summer in November, do you show up and do you make this binary choice?
But in the binary choice, Trump is better trusted by majorities of people in polls on the economy, on immigration, on basically every issue except abortion right now. The American people are saying who they, in this binary choice, who they would rather have. Right now in this binary choice, it looks like Biden's going to lose.
Then Democrats have a lot of work to do ahead of them.
Yeah.
And people who don't like Trump have a lot of work to do ahead of them. But I would say to the double haters, figure out if you're going to participate in the system or not. That's what this is. How are you going to participate in this system?
But wouldn't we say
don't like it, but it's the one we got.
It's the Democrats' own fault for nominating and not really having an actual process for having someone else, having this be the candidate, not doing anything about it, even after that debate performance. And he's obviously going to lose, and then you're going to say it's the fault of people for not being insufficiently excited about this walking.
No, I'm just not.
Again?
These are, for me, And for anybody else who
Yeah.
wants to maintain their sanity for the next couple of months, I think it is a process of separating the two things.
Yeah.
There is an opportunity at the convention for those who have actually been part of the system that is already arcane and doesn't welcome people in easily. Will those people, like the Jamie Raskins, like Hakeem Jeffries, who says that this is a conversation they need to have, will they actually have that conversation? But just like when Trump was running again, this is what parties do. They line up behind the incumbent.
Yeah.
And that's if something does not happen to change
But this is an
in August.
exceptional circumstance because we have never had a candidate this old and in an obvious state of mental decline.
We have never had a candidate like Trump who after
never had a candidate like Biden.
who after 4 years in office, coming back with more of a vendetta, with a plan and a system to dismantle our systems of checks and balances, who makes it very clear.
The vendetta, he said he got asked about that. He said his revenge would be fixing the country.
It is not about
vendetta.
It is not about party
Of course it's
or
about fixing the
people.
country.
Trump is about Trump. He is not good for minorities, individual systems, for the idea of public health and how you navigate science. The binary choice that we are most likely to have in November will come down to, of these two old white men, which one do you think will be better for your family and your country going forward?
Trump.
Do you really think that you're going to vote for Trump?
Absolutely. I will not be voting for either candidate, but
So
Biden
why did
cannot
you
be
just
the
say
president.
no? That was a
for
direct. I'm saying this is you as a voter will have to go in there and answer that question.
Yeah, I'm a Libertarian member of the Libertarian Party. I will be voting in all likelihood for the Libertarian Party candidate. Full disclosure, everyone out there, I don't. But I really would not vote for Trump or Biden. But last time around, I was like, I would absolutely, under no circumstances, ever vote for Trump. I mean, I'm not voting for either of them, to be clear. But this time, I really don't understand how anyone could vote for Biden to be president again, given what we just saw. He's not, as a baseline, I do not believe that he is capable of being president for 4 more years, given his age. It's not ideological, it's given his fitness for the office. I don't support Trump, and I won't be voting for either of them, to be clear, but my view, and I'm sure there are millions of Americans who feel this way too after watching this, that Biden simply cannot. I have questions about whether Biden can and should be the president right now. Whether he can be the president for 4 more additional years seems just like beyond everything to me. And Democrats should do something about it. But we'll see if they will.
And hopefully things will change in the next couple of months where Trump is not doing as great as he is doing right now, but I think optimism is not very high in the American public. We already have a majority of the electorate right now, rather voters, are unaffiliated, right? They don't believe in the system, and I'm arguing that if what you want is a functioning system 10 years, 20 years from now, look at what Trump appointees are doing on the Supreme Court, look at what Trump acolytes are doing in Congress, and understand that this is who Trump is surrounding himself with. This is how he gets into power. This is how we start that backsliding of democracies on a global scale. It's, it's happening in Europe, it's happening here in the United States, and maybe lots of folks are okay with that. Listen, 40% of Americans, when you poll them and you actually talk about what a democracy entails, that give and take and that balance, they actually kind of like authoritarianism. 40% of Americans are like, yeah, we should tell other people what to do with their lives all the time.
No, we disagree with what authoritarianism is. I would say authoritarianism is when a vast federal bureaucracy makes all the policies and implements them with no congressional oversight, no oversight from the democratic process. We disagree about what authoritarianism is. The people yelling at us about the democratic stakes are the people trying to put Trump in jail or keep him off the ballot. So the democracy argument is being wielded in total bad faith by partisan political operators. No, we don't want to live in an authoritarian system. I want people to have more choice and control over their own lives, over how they run their businesses, over how they conduct their affairs, and that authority should be at the most local level to them so they can have that actual input. So many people on the right and people in Trump's camp don't believe that the progressives of the Democratic Party is pro-democracy. In fact, they believe that it's ruled by just what you said, experts and science people that that you can't double check, that you can't hold accountable, the kind of people who ruled us during COVID, the kind of people who some of us think are responsible for the entire thing in the first place. That's what the right is trying to dismantle, and Trump actually got a 4-year shot to do it, and he didn't. And I think that's the biggest mark against him, that he railed against the deep state and all these people, and then he wasn't even able to stop them from wrapping their tentacles around him. He would, like, let alone dismantling the federal administrative state. So that's my biggest criticism of him, is that he's not able to do these things he set out.
He's done a very
Trump has
done a very good job at emboldening Christian nationalists and allowing for Christian
nationalists.
The idea of separation of church and state, and how Trump works very closely with evangelicals to write into law what are very specific religious views. That is part of the Trump coalition. So yes, there are things that Trump is doing to deregulate, but it is done as part of a coalition that is perfectly happy to regulate women's bodies, to perfectly happy to have adjusted versions of the 10 Commandments on public property, and now in Oklahoma, teaching the Bible in public schools, which I doubt is going to be the version of Bible that people, discuss in terms of historical context or from an academic perspective. So all of this, yes, that's the right is getting what they want with Trump. The disagreement is that the right has the one view of how the world or all Americans want to live, and the Americans who don't want to live like that certainly have their work cut out for them.
All right, more Rising right after this. France is turning to the right. France's far-right party, the National Rally, is leading in the first round of parliamentary elections in the country, delivering a crushing blow to French President Emmanuel Macron's Central Alliance. In Sunday's election, the National Rally, the nationalist anti-immigration party, received a third of the overall vote. They were in first place, followed by the center-left New Popular Front coalition, which came in second, and then Macron's centrist alliance came in third. So the right was in first place, then the left, then the center Macron party. These results confirmed that the right, which has not seen a government in France since World War II, the far right, is no longer on the fringes of French politics at all. Now, the second round of voting will take place next Sunday, July 7th.
Polling projections suggest the National Rally will have the most seats in the next National Assembly, the lower house of the French Parliament, but it is unclear whether it will receive an absolute majority of 289 of the 577 seats, according to the Associated Press. Supporters of the National Rally, including the party's former presidential candidate Marine Le Pen, were ecstatic over these results. Demonstrators on the other side of the aisle took to the streets in Paris yesterday, protesting a likely far-right takeover in the French government.
Yeah, more than protesting, there was some property destruction in a lot of places as rioting commenced following this result. So it could still be the case that Macron's coalition and the progressive left parties that came in second place are able to form some kind of agreement to have Macron, or I guess someone else in that coalition, retain power. So it's not over for Macron by any stretch of the imagination. However, this is how a parliamentary system works. There's actual vote trading and coalition. Imagine if that were possible. It's not just a absolute winner-take-all binary that we enjoy here in America. But as for now, the right was winning, which is, I think, a really stunning rebuke of the kind of centrist sort of government that has dominated in France and in Germany and in the UK and other European places, are really reeling from the fact that the people are dissatisfied with whatever ideology you want to call it, centrism, neoliberalism, globalism, cosmopolitanism. There is a sense among the people of Europe that these policies are not working.
It's more than just the policies, right? It's a sense of identity that feels under threat, and part of what right-wing movements do around the world, here in the United States, elsewhere, is say, they make an identity that is very much limited. And there's an us and them version of it, right? There's we are French and you are not. You who keep coming in are to blame for our inability to figure out how we want to do our socialist system right over there. They have aging populations. We have one of those too, that are are challenging their ability to provide things like their version of healthcare. Similarly, how our healthcare system here and Social Security, I guess, as the thing that people can rely on as they're aging. Social Security is going to be bankrupt because it was designed to help an older generation off of the backs of the labor of a younger generation, right? And that is just not sustainable over time. That's the policy piece, right? That needs to be negotiated, figured out, and sorted out. And when it was done by Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, and they figured out a medium-term compromise, they did it in a bipartisan way, bucking what their parties had wanted to do and their party's ideological line. So this moment does not bring forward that type of bipartisan, let's work together on policy. What moments like this internationally bring forward are these concerns about who you are and how your life's going to be in this economic environment for an entire generation. We're seeing all of these massive upheavals globally, and some people find it politically advantageous to turn that into a fear-based rather than a coalition-based argument of how you should live as a society. So I say this because what makes Marie Le Pen far right and of concern to so many people and resulting in the protests that you're seeing is so much of Germany and France and these parts of Europe have relied on migrant labor, educated migrant labor specifically in Germany, but that is also then challenging their sense of, well, who do you welcome into the country? Who are you? Like, how do you do immigration? And Marie Le Pen's answer is French. If you are French, you have to be white, you have to be Christian, and you cannot be an immigrant.
Look, I am a lot more supportive of immigration than other people on the right in general. In fact, I did a big debate last week for Zero Hedge on X on immigration, where I took the America should have more immigration side.
Legal immigration.
Yes, more legal immigration. I would like to make legal immigration easier because in the U.S., we need people to come in and to work and to contribute to our society and help build houses. And a lot of the fear-mongering on immigration is not true in America. It's not. We have the crime problem we have in some of our cities is not substantially due to immigrants at all. If you just look at the statistics of who's committing the crimes. In Europe, I will say, I still remain supportive of immigration. Europe is facing a different immigration system than the U.S. The U.S. has waves of Hispanic immigrants coming up through Mexico from our south who actually have a lot in common with us culturally, who are actually more likely to be Christian than the underlying population of the U.S., who are fleeing socialism, who are hardworking and believe in the American dream and entrepreneurship. Europe has faced wave after wave after wave of Islamic refugees from the Middle East, given all the chaos going on there. And I think a lot of people in Europe have a sense. It's not. I wouldn't say it's an identity-based sense, but it's based on the actual creed or the actual beliefs of the people coming in. And to my mind, while I'm not an expert, I think the crime issues being faced in Europe can be more directly tied to the migrants coming in those cases. That there are a lot of examples of crime in those cases.
All right. Wow. So. The majority of the American population right now is religious. Look at Pew Research, the more and more people are just declaring themselves that they believe in a thing or a being, right? They believe in something, but they don't ascribe to a particular doctrine. Americans. Oh yes, the vast, and it's increasing, and it worries people who run faith communities, right? They're like, how are we losing such a big population? But that is the majority of the American population right now. So to say that...
The people pouring into Europe are not irreligious. They're very religious.
To say that Hispanic or Mexican Americans coming in because they are Christian have more in common with Americans is a very flattening, incorrect argument about how America is and how it works, and frankly how Americans have treated Latinos and Hispanics in recent generations. So that's just a factual statement I'm making about data there. Another data point to bring in is Germany welcomed Syrian refugees, which was the big start of the migrant crisis of Muslims, I think you call them Islamists, and actually Syrian Christians too. So lots of Syrian Christians and Muslims. And shocking, this may be shocking to you, but actually many people in the Middle East are also a-religious. It's just generally a broader global trend.
Many people in Europe are a-religious. The people coming in are more religious.
So
if you want to foster this secular society, it seems to you that's very important, secularism.
So
you're not going to have that by taking in millions of Islamic refugees.
So the refugees coming in from the Middle East are Arab. To say that they are all Islamic is false. To say that they are all identify as Muslim is false. So back to my data point, Germany welcomed Syrian refugees because they are, by and large, were a more educated population, and what Germany needed at the time was more engineers. A labor force that was able to do the things like, build more bridges, do all the infrastructure development they needed. So they were deeply welcoming of Syrian refugees and actually have an example that the United Nations uses now of how refugees can be integrated into society. And, immigration can happen in ways that make sense for local populations and the migrants. Bigger picture here, and what we're not capable of addressing in these far-right conversations or in the current political dynamic is the fact that the number one crisis we have in the world, climate change, I get that, but in terms of people, is the movement of people that will happen because of conflict, because of famine, and that is only increasing. We have 70 million people in the world who are displaced. Mm-hmm. That is one of the root causes of migration that we have coming in from Latin America. So when you are a leader in a country, how are you going to tackle these problems as part of a global community? Because pretending like these are not global problems where what happens in Ecuador or what happens in Honduras no longer affects the United States, right? So yes, of course, there's the version of we can pretend and just say it is not our problem. But as you mentioned, there is a way that immigration can be helpful to a country and it can be additive to a country if you actually bother to legislate and make those policies rather than saying just blame all your problems on the brown people from the South, which is effectively you're saying don't blame the brown people from Latin America for American problems, but it's okay if Europe blames the brown people from the Middle East.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yes. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we understood that as your brown co-host for today, Robby.
You care a lot about having a secular society. That's come through in your. France does too.
I also, but I want to say that
when it's taking tons of new religious people into the country. They're concerned if you're concerned that they won't have a.
You went to Catholic school.
And I'm pretty secular. I'm not a.
I believe in secular societies,
Catholic,
but I am.
So do I.
I do believe in communities of faith. I will just leave it at that. So I do very much believe in communities of faith and what they can offer for families and for communities, but not at a government structured level. We mentioned this. We've talked about this before.
Sure.
France, which is why you say you know this about me. France has a freedom from religion. It should not change that as part of its laws. America has freedom of religion.
Right.
Right? There are ways that then means how you comport yourself in public and all of that. Abiding by the laws, great. But the fact that you have entrepreneurs who are coming in, France, for example, who are offering cheaper cuts of meat than French charcuterie, and French citizens are flocking to those restaurants or those butchers because they are cheaper cuts of meat, and instead the far right wants to regulate against that. They want to regulate against that because they say this is destroying our French national heritage of charcuterie. So it is entirely based on the fact that those cheaper cuts of meat happen to come from Muslim business owners. That's what that is. That is not a free market way of doing any kind of economy or embracing the opportunity that, frankly, your own citizens are saying they want. It's about maintaining a purity of national identity.
There's a reason that the right is winning these elections. The citizens
because that is
are
a
saying
very potent message.
Call
it
them
works.
all racist. See if that works. It's not going to work. The leaders, if you want an open immigration policy, as I do, the leaders have to explain why that's going to be beneficial for the country and have to be reasonable about it and have to understand and be sympathetic to the idea that assimilation does need to take place. And we can be a little bit, I even believe this in America, we can be choosy about which immigrants we come in. We have to have intense screening for criminal backgrounds, for terrorist affiliations, for all of that, because we need to keep our communities safe. Or there will be more there will be even more intense anti-immigrant sentiment. I don't want there to be intense anti-immigrant sentiment. As I've said, I think immigration is a good thing. It's economically clearly a good thing. There's no real debate on whether it's a good thing economically, but we have to do it in a reasonable fashion so that people are not alarmed by it, and that it doesn't some vast new influx altering the culture and the DNA of the country. That's less likely to happen in America because America is a more diverse place than Europe. America is a diverse place. America has, like you said, a lot of different people from different religious backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds. My ancestors came over from Italy. They weren't considered white people. They were considered minorities. They were treated like dirt. The Irish were treated like dirt. Now those all get lumped in as white people, but no one until modern times ever saw these different these different people from all these different countries as just like white. They're fundamentally different. They were hated, but they contributed constructively to the DNA of the country and are part of the story of how America came to be. We want that to continue to be the case, and I want that to be the case for people coming into Europe. But it is causing some issues, and it's not. I don't think it's constructive or helpful to pretend that there are no issues, or there will always be pleasant and it won't be messy, or to say that you're racist or you just hate brown people coming to the country if you're worried about crime in your neighborhood.
Interesting, because there's so much in what you said that I hear and understand and feel about how you talk to a population and help people as leaders, what leaders should help people understand. Right. Reagan, his last speech in the White House was about the value of immigration. Yeah. Right? It was all.
I agree with him.
And it is entirely different than what you hear from America's right now, and entirely different from what you hear from what Reagan did, and had the highest number of refugees actually were accepted under Reagan, and it's declined ever since. And it's unrecognizable that what Reagan was arguing for immigration and how you deal with that in terms of integration and how you deal with that for the economy is just, you don't recognize that at all in the right today, whether in France or even here in the United States in the GOP. And that's sad. The idea that assimilation or diversity is ever easy, or that it's not going to create challenges of identity and conflict is absurd. Anybody knows that when they've gone to a new town, right? Like, these are things that you have to help people navigate, and I don't think the leaders in the right wing are helping people navigate that in ways that are productive for society. They're inflaming passions. These are potent messages that time and time again work. And to your point about Irish immigrants, they became white when they were separated from working class blacks and told that they could be treated better than black people. So we can pause on that, the idea of racial segmentation, but absolutely people become an identity or become white when often they've been put in opposition to black and brown people.
We'll have more Rising right after this.
First Lady Jill Biden is now being criticized by Republicans for supporting her husband staying in the presidential race. Republicans' latest freakout is over this. Her August Vogue cover that was released today, Jill Biden told Vogue that they, quote, will not let those 90 minutes define the 4 years he's been president. We will continue to fight, and, quote, we'll always do what's best for the country.
As a reminder, this was Jill Biden following her husband's disastrous debate performance.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Yes.
Reacting online, Meghan McCain tweeted, quote, Jill Biden will not be remembered kindly in American history. Meanwhile, billionaire and CEO of Pershing Square, Bill Ackman, tweeted, quote, I no longer blame POTUS Biden for not stepping aside. He no longer has the mental acuity to make important judgments about himself. It's becoming increasingly clear, however, the fault lies with FLOTUS Jill Biden. First Lady Jill Biden has become irrelevant. Jill Biden becomes irrelevant the moment that her husband is no longer president. Yes, lots of discussion of Jill Biden's role in all of this lately. I think that Vogue cover was not well timed, given that so many people are I think, blaming her for encouraging Joe Biden to run for re-election in the first place and to stick it out now. I mean, I've heard people ask, why is she subjecting him to this?
Clearly, right? Just blame the wife. Let's blame the wife for the decisions of an entire cabal of individuals, right? I mean,
but he said he's listening to his family.
What is she supposed to? What is she supposed to do as a public figure? Truly, what is she supposed to do as a public figure? Get up there at the rally and say what? Joe, I'm going to say in front of millions and millions of people.
Obviously not.
Right, but when she does the stand by your man thing, apparently that's not good enough either. Melania doesn't even show up for stuff. She didn't show up for the debate. She's not there at all. At least, I mean, Jill Biden.
I don't think she wanted him to run again. I don't think she wanted him to run in the first place.
Again, the woman in a public setting, a smart woman who is playing the public role of wife, is not in an easy spot. So if there are problems with the Democratic Party and how they're making decisions, that is not Jill Biden.
But what if she is the one who made the decision? What if she was the one who convinced him that he should? If she's convincing him,
I'm not interested in getting into anyone's. That's what we're hearing. That's what we're hearing about somebody else's marriage right now. What I do know that they've said, what they've said about their marriage, right? What they have said, and what I do admire about their marriage. I will say this. Then this goes back, because Joe Biden's been around for decades. And I think people relate to this when we are reminded of this story of how, at the death of his young wife and his child, Joe Biden not only was a single father for many years, he also then married a woman who embraced the stepchildren as her own family. And that is not easy to do. It is not easy to find that woman. It is not easy to be that woman. So I have a lot of respect for their marriage, which is separate from, which is
like a lovely wife and mother.
The whole thing about Jill Biden will not be remembered, go down well in history because she stood up there and told her husband.
No, for pushing.
There are many women, by the way, there are many women who lie to their husbands' faces all the time. Not saying it's a good idea or that you should continue to do that, but that is how many marriages work. And if that's a discussion we have, got it.
I don't want to discuss marriage.
We can do relationship counseling.
We're not.
But the idea of taking their marriage and saying that she's responsible for his choices, come on. He's a grown man. He's choosing to stay in.
Very simple thing, which is that she seems to be encouraging him to run for re-election. That's the reporting I've heard is that she was all in for it, and so this situation we're in, where Joe Biden, many people are concerned he doesn't have that he could do the job of being president again, given the cognitive decline, and that it is somewhat, she's the one to blame for having made this be the choice before us right now, that it's her. That's the criticism she's getting.
Because apparently a man who has been in public office forever, who actually started his, it was one of the things he said about his debate. He's like, I used to be criticized for being too young, and now I'm considered too old. I'm like, because you've been around for a really long time, guy. But that man suddenly blamed the woman for that man's choices, who, even in the last 4 years, clearly there have been many, many people around him who are supporting this, and many supporters who still want to see Biden run, and keep that infrastructure and all the things they talk about. And who you surround yourself as president, it does matter to the world, right? Not just the country, it matters to the world. And staffers who have a very intimate relationship with a president, and yes, that's the question, is are staff and other people watching out for their power?
I mean, are we going to be in
what's better for him?
Are we going to be
I feel like that is more in line with what makes sense politically than to throw in, let's blame the wife for what is a power system of people who do not like to step away from power. Don't blame the wife for being the one to not tell him he should step away from power.
So during Woodrow Wilson's second term, from 1916 to 1920, he had just gotten back from Europe. We're dealing with the World War I stuff, and he had a debilitating stroke. And Edith Wilson was effectively the president at the time. She controlled who got access to him, she decided which papers he would read every day, which things he would respond to. She she ran the White House completely herself because she was concerned about his health and she didn't want to tax him. And she would decide, is this important enough that he does have to read it, or is it not? And if it's not, he's not going to see it. He's not going to deal with it. And
another one who did that.
People are a lot of comparisons to a situation we could find ourselves in if Joe Biden is reelected.
Well, Ronald Reagan, right? The naps he used to take in meetings, and even on camera just fall asleep in meetings.
Well, I'm now told 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. is all you should expect from your president.
And apparently, Nancy Reagan, remember about this, and she had a psychic that she liked to get all this information from, and that was a whole thing about, is this psychic through the First Lady? Is that actually how things are running these days? So yes, the relationships around a president absolutely matter. And they're fascinating and they're interesting. But when it's a pylon like this, I think it's fair to call out that there's other dynamics at play than just really being concerned about the state of the presidency.
Somebody had tweeted Ronald Reagan's final press conference in response to the debate the other day, and so I did watch it. He is so sharp, and so he thinks, he's taking hostile questions from media reporters, and he doesn't lose a single second. He's weighing in on a vast range of topics, and I kept thinking, and people were saying that they were worried this guy was too old or this guy has a touch of Alzheimer's setting in about this performance. There is no comparison to what we're seeing now.
But to the Nancy Reagan point, right? Like, it's debate the president's faculties here and there, but the First Lady has always come under scrutiny for how much or how little influence that she has on a president. And it's a really tough job for a modern woman to do. And just, give her some grace for backing up her guy.
I never believed for a second that Melania had any influence over Trump, over policy, over anything of a policy nature ever. For what she did was like decorate the White House Christmas display in a way I thought was kind of cool, and she has a good sense of style, and that's all. She was not involved in policy, and that's totally fine, and she's cool, and that's fine.
We're not talking about Jill being involved in policy. We're talking about her telling her husband that she's backing him up because he's the one who's making the decision to run again. He is the one doing this, and she's backing up her husband by showing up.
Okay. That does it for us for today on Rising. Thank you so much for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Going to be trying out some new guest co-hosts on Rising in the coming days, so you won't want to miss that. I'll see you back here tomorrow.